How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in this episode, I'll be talking through some early Week 14 fantasy football lineup advice for the wide receiver position. In this episode, I'll be covering a handful of players at that position group that I think either have a bust-worthy potential for this week or could potentially boom and give us some nice ceiling value or dependability in our lineups for this week's game. So with that being said, if you're new around here, it'd mean a lot to me if you would head on down, smash that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. We're dropping fantasy analysis all throughout this week, so make sure you guys are here for that and don't miss anything from the channel here. And with that being said, let's dive right on into our first player. All right, so the first name that I really wanted to cover in today's episode is Garrett Wilson of the New York Football Jets, on the road taking on the Buffalo Bills this week. Now, technically, you never know what could happen with the weather at Orchard Park. It seems to be rather extreme at times there. Now, I tried to go and check out an in-depth forecast, some information on what that was going to look like for this week. But here, late Monday evening when I'm recording this episode to get it out to you all on early Tuesday morning, that information is not currently available to me. So, hopefully nothing takes a turn for the worse here. But I do really like how Wilson has been unlocked in this offense as of late. Now, this defense can be relatively hit or miss in terms of talking Buffalo here for a second. There's been opportunities where this defensive secondary has been really banged up. They've struggled against the pass. Now they're starting to get a bit more healthy. The matchup becomes a bit stingier, but the usage is the key here for Garrett Wilson and this Jets offense. At the very least, unless you are completely loaded at your wide receiver position, this should be a wide receiver 3, aka a flex level insert for you guys based on what he's done with back-to-back 20-plus point games with 23 targets in that span. He's coming off of 162 yards here against Minnesota, 2 touchdowns the week prior. This guy is the alpha wide receiver in this Jets offense, and he needs some respect on his name here. So Garrett Wilson will be getting starts from me in a lot of leagues here in Week 14. Jerry Jeudy next up here. For Jerry Jeudy taking on the Kansas City Chiefs, assuming Jerry is healthy and going into this game. Now, he played fairly well this past week, or at least average, or fairly well in the context of the Denver Broncos. Let's put it that way. I will still be laying Jerry Jeudy out as a low-end starter for this week. The reason that I like Jerry in this matchup, quite honestly, the only Denver Bronco I like in this Kansas City football game, is because I expect a negative game script for this Broncos team. Their defense is exceptional and keeps them in nearly every single game here, but Kansas City, to me, coming off of an emotional loss against a team that beat them twice last year, once in the AFC divisional round, really seemed, or excuse me, that was the AFC championship game, really seems to me like a situation where Kansas City is going to have their best punch this week. I expect the Denver Broncos offense to be trailing for the majority of this game, that increasing the opportunities in the passing game for players like Jerry Jeudy, who I view as the wide receiver 1 for this team, especially this week with Courtland Sutton's hamstring injury. Now, Sutton is considered to be day-to-day here, but those hamstring issues absolutely suck. They limit the sharpness of your cuts. They limit your explosiveness, your ability to obviously beat people downfield. To me, Jerry or really Courtland, we'll go back to that for a second here, is going to be a decoy if he's out there in that circumstance. I don't expect him to have too much success, and that really leaves Jerry Jeudy and a band of misfits that aren't necessarily the most apt receivers to do damage to this defense. So for Jeudy, again, it's expected opportunities. It's the potential negative game script here. And a talented player who's played in terrible offense this year, just hoping that with the 6 teams we have on bye this week, he can at least make himself a wide receiver 3/flex level player here. Gabe Davis, Buffalo this week taking on the New York Football Jets. This is a matchup where I'll be sitting Gabriel Davis. We've seen it all. He's basically an emotional roller coaster. I have little to no confidence or faith in his floor in any given fantasy matchup. He actually scored a touchdown this past week, but mustered just 2 receptions for 15 yards on 7 targets. And his touchdown was made from some Josh Allen magic. And, really, he wasn't even that open. It was more so a situation where Josh Allen scrambled in and out of the pocket and made one of the throws of the week here from week 13. So in this matchup against a stingy and tough Jets defense, the fact that volume is never a guarantee for Gabe Davis, I'll be sitting him down here again. so little faith in what the weekly floor represents for him here. I would rather have him on my bench than as my wide receiver 3. I just feel like it's become such a volatile situation with his fantasy stock. And again, this Jets defense has been playing really good football. And if I was going to expect the wide receiver 2 for the Bills to underproduce in any game, this one with Gabe Davis would be one of those I would circle on the schedule. DJ Moore, Carolina, coming off of a bye in week 13. Everybody, I want you to take 1 second here and take a pause. Just a real good, thorough appreciation that Baker Mayfield is not on this team anymore. I was so happy for DJ Moore and frankly that entire locker room when that absolute atrocity was released from the team. Now, I am crossing my fingers, 49ers fans, for all of you, that Baker stays clear of your organization. I was pretty brutal on Brock Purdy yesterday, and I was, honestly, I've probably been one of the more negative outlets here talking through Brock Purdy and his impact on what it means for San Francisco's chances, their offense, and all that stuff. And we're going to talk through that here in just a second today. But I would rather have Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy and everything he brings to the table than I would, obviously want to have Baker Mayfield in that situation. So that was my quick, detour from the actual talk in today's episode. But I am exceptionally excited and happy just to see DJ Moore liberated from the grasp of ever potentially having to play with Baker Mayfield again. So DJ Moore here. Sam Darnold has been named the team starter here at Seattle for Week 14. We all know that DJ can be a top 24 fantasy football wide receiver when Sam is in the lineup. Again, we have a whole sample size from 2021. We've got the Week 12 game pre-bye week for DJ Moore here where he caught 4 of his 6 targets for a $103 and a touchdown. He can get the job done. So Sam's target quality is not always at the highest level, but DJ Moore's ability as a wide receiver is pretty up there. I expect in this Seattle matchup, which does allow success in the yardage department, it allows teams to move inside the 20s. They're an opportunistic takeaway, high-energy defense. This isn't necessarily a all-out stifling defense that stops you dead in your tracks and prevents you from gaining yardage. That isn't quite what the Seahawks defense is. So I think DJ's got an opportunity to have a better floor than we're used to seeing here. His floor on a weekly basis is not very good, but I do have elevated expectations for this particular matchup, as well as his ceiling. Obviously, if he gets loose and Darnold actually puts an accurate ball in his chest down the field, obviously could score and have an impressive ceiling here for this week. Brandon Aiyuk. This one's tough for me because I really like Aiyuk, the player. I love his route running. I love his athleticism and the dynamic ability that he has to be used at the line of scrimmage in space. He's probably their most pure wide receiver on the team, their most traditional wideout, if that makes sense, between having Deebo Samuel and an array of other weapons there. So Aiyuk, though, this week, I'm trending towards wanting to keep him on my bench. I think that overall the changing offensive dynamic here in San Fran is going to be a little bit more towards the run game. I think that if anyone benefits from Christian McCaffrey, if anyone benefits from the Jimmy Garoppolo injury, the only guy would probably be Christian McCaffrey. Brandon Aiyuk, the guy who, as I said, being the more traditional receiver, is more dependent on timing and accuracy in his passes. If he's running a deep 15, 20-yard dig route, having Jimmy put it on the button in stride, I don't know how quickly those things are going to click here with Brock Purdy. And I have my skepticisms, if I'm being completely honest. I've had my skepticisms about Brandon Aiyuk as a fantasy player all year because of my expectations that he wouldn't be a top-end player in this offense from a volume perspective. He scored touchdowns and was able to, hold me off and prove me wrong for a chunk of time here. But I think that, the Grim Reaper of fantasy football production has finally come for Brandon Aiyuk. I'm staying away from him in this game. Tampa Bay versus San Francisco, I expect to just be an absolute defensive slogging, probably a very tough watch, a low-scoring game. So staying away from pass catchers in this one. Deebo is interesting because I do see a little bit more utility for him at the line of scrimmage, catching short screen routes and asking him to get out in space. Although he's been banged up, not looking like himself for much of this year. It's a really interesting situation to break down as a whole. I'm excited to see how that offense plays out this week, but I have my, again, worries, concerns, and skepticisms here. Finally, the last name I'll talk about in today's episode is Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, for Diontae, there's been a couple of really promising signs in the last couple of weeks for him here. So the first thing I'm going to touch on here is that I think his floor value has been slightly on the rise. Now, we literally have not seen his ceiling whatsoever yet this season, but I do think that there is a chance that it's coming down the stretch of these meaningful games here. Kenny Pickett is getting better, and despite the fact that they are not offensively lighting up the stat department and showing massive chunk yardage gained, they're producing at a higher level and moving the football downfield, scoring points much more consistently than they did early in the Kenny Pickett experience. That's a big deal here. Diontae Johnson has had 19 targets in his last 2 games. He has only 5 receptions, respectively, in each of those contests. He had 11 targets this past week after posting 8 the week prior in week 12. I like what I'm seeing here. This is one of the best receivers in the game. We forget that because he hasn't had the statistical production to produce or to back up the claims there. But he is still insanely good at route running. He can win vertically. He can run the whole route tree. He just needs to cash in on these opportunities. And some of this is missed fantasy points. He's dropping passes, man. And I'm not going to put that past him here and let him off the hook for that, because some of this is self-inflicted lacking production. But in this matchup against Baltimore, seeing that inflated use and target volume the last couple of weeks, I think Diontae Johnson is a safer wide receiver 3 start than guys like Gabe Davis who are sitting this week, than guys like Brandon Aiyuk, who I just hate his offensive situation here. So, again, I wouldn't rely on Diontae Johnson to be the guy that wins your week for you this week. As I said, his ceiling is still quite underwhelming, but there is a lot that I do like in this matchup against Baltimore without Lamar Jackson. I think that the Steelers could be very competitive in this game and maybe even make a run at potentially upsetting this Baltimore team that is likely without Lamar Jackson and will be starting Tyler Huntley in this game. So there you guys have it. To recap, we're starting Garrett Wilson this week. We are also starting Jerry Jeudy. We're sitting Gabe Davis of the Buffalo Bills. We are starting DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers, sitting Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers, and then we are starting Diontae Johnson at home against the Baltimore Ravens here. As always, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, smash that like button. It helps me out a lot. As always, comment section below is open for your questions. I'll get back to as many of you as I possibly can throughout this week. I want to be a tool and a resource helping you guys when it matters the most for your fantasy football season this year as we finish up the 2022 year. So thank you guys so much. Check out our running back segment that is live today on the channel as well, and I'll see you there. Peace out.